people are tuned in. Does anybody have any questions about that dependent origination that we recited? Baba? Well, in some translations they translate Baba as existence, but I prefer the translation of becoming, because it makes more kind of logical sense, the word becoming. But becoming leads to existence. That means becoming leads to birth. I'm gonna one of these, maybe the talk tomorrow or before. I hope to try to go over that fairly briefly, because it's a big subject. But yeah. But Baba, it means becoming, because the word usually, bhavana, it comes from bhavana. And bhavana means to grow or to develop. That's why it's called the word for meditation, like metta bhavana. It means growing metta in your mind, or developing metta in your mind. Or samatha bhavana, developing concentration. Satipatthana bhavana, developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So it has the term of cultivating or developing. And so becoming means accumulating karma, and it's developing the fuel for the future birth, or even for the next moment. And when you're born, of course, then you're existing. So that's why some people call it, existence. But it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. The becoming part, it makes more sense. It's the link between grasping and birth, the becoming, which it means existing, because becoming means the ego keeps growing, the ego keeps developing because of the karma. So craving, grasping, and becoming is called the karma process, and so the main parts of the Paticca Samuppada, in terms of how we practice the Dhamma with that, is, from the future life we already have ignorance, and we already have the karma formations, and we already have consciousness, and you already have the mind and body, and you have the 6 senses, and you have contacts. There's nothing you can do about that. Once you're born, you already have those things. But what you can actually do in this life is pay attention to feelings, craving, grasping, and becoming. And that's the only thing that you can change or alter. And of course, in developing those things, then you're also changing the other things too, but it's kind of complicated. But becoming is the actual creation of karma. So first you have a feeling, let's say a painful feeling arises, like an itch, or maybe a fly lands on you. So then that's contact. The fly landing on your skin is contact. It produces a feeling, material vibration, the aggregate of materiality. But then the feeling comes with an unpleasant feeling. And the craving means the desire to get away, get it out, get away from it. And then that's the initial craving. But then if you have a good mindfulness, you could just see how, never mind, just let it fly there and let it walk on my face and never mind. And you keep on meditating. So you don't create any karma toward it at that time. But if you don't have mindfulness and you don't have control and restraint, then that craving turns into grasping, which means a continued thinking about the object. And deciding, thinking, planning, scheming, how am I going to get rid of this fly? Should I or shouldn't I? And all this stuff. So grasping is a long process. It can take up to 7 thought moments, according to Abhidhamma. And then you have to come to a decision. Am I going to slap that fly or just, let it go off or just don't do anything? So you have some time to make a decision. But then you have to do something. And so if you actually lift up your hand and let's say kill the fly or mosquito, then you've created karma of killing. Or even if you just shoot it away, then you've created the karma of increasing your aversion and increasing the sense of self. I mean, it's kind of complicated, and it's not easy just to explain in a couple words. But anyway, that becoming increases your storehouse of karma, just to use that kind of talk, that phrase. So every time you create becoming, it means a karmic action, a speaking, and using your body, you strengthen those habits. And then that will cause you to repeat the same habit again in the future, which is birth. That means it's born again. The habit will be born again. It will repeat itself again. So that's kind of a birth. And also the sense of ourself. You strengthen the sense of self. Every time you get the object of your desire, oh, I won, I got it. Or you get away from the object of your pain, oh, I got rid of it. Oh, good riddance. That increases your sense of self. And so it'll be reborn again in the next moment. That means it keeps giving fuel to craving and aversion and the ego. Every time you go through that process of craving, grasping, and becoming. And then if it's still there before you died, then that's what's going to propel the consciousness into the next life. If you haven't, attained enlightenment. I mean, just to kind of keep it short. But the main practice of Dhamma is to prevent becoming, because that's where the karma is created. So when you're meditating, you can't really do much about craving, because until you have reached once returning, your craving is always going to be there, desire and aversion. And really, you can't do much about craving. What you can do is curb grasping. A lot of people think you have to give up craving. No, if you think that, you're going to go mad. You can't give up craving until you reach the stages of enlightenment. But what you can work, the ordinary person, what you can do in their practice is to prevent or minimize grasping and becoming. Those are the two important ones, the biggies. Because that's where you're creating the karma. Grasping means the continued thinking, oh, I have to have that. Yes, I'll die without that. And planning and scheming. And then you come to a decision, and then you actually do it and create the karma. That's where the practice of Dhamma comes into play.
So how we make reaction after grasping, you make a decision, and then actually the stage of power becoming, right?
Yes. Okay, let's see what kind of questions were. What is this? A book? That's a simple question. Yes and no question. No, not really. How are these teachings around merit, karma, rebirth misunderstood and manipulated, particularly in Buddhist countries? It seems like one could easily come to the view that people in difficult circumstances deserve to be there, since it is their karma, and well-to-do people just try to gain favorable rebirth with donations rather than real sacrifice and practice. Well, it's a big subject, but merit, karma, and rebirth, can be misunderstood and manipulated. But, it's but the view that people in difficult circumstances deserve to be there, since it is their karma. Well, to some extent, that is true. Because in the sutras is mentioned, people are born of their karma. Karma is their kith and kin. Karma is the womb from which they're born. And whatever good deeds or bad deeds you do, you'll be the heir of that. And if you don't attain enlightenment before you die, those impressions and memories of the karma that you've done, either good karma or bad karma, will affect where the consciousness will go in the future. And if you led a life of, just eat, drink, and be merry, and hell with anybody else, and just living selfishly and, stingily, being miserly, and not helping others, doing stuff like that, then that's considered to be, unskillful. Or you're telling lies and cheating people and a lot of things like that, no regard for, living beings. And then you may well be born in unfavorable circumstances. But that's not, there's no God sending you there, that's your own karma. It's the way of the karma, the law of cause and effect. Now you can believe it or not, or like it or dislike it, but there is some truth to that. But it shouldn't be considered as deterministic. Now we can change our karma. See, the Hindus, they believe that you can't change your karma. And so they believe that anybody who's born in unfavorable circumstances, like in untouchable places, untouchabilities, are born in a caste. So they can't change their caste. And so they have to obey the rules of living in their caste because they think it's, fixed. But the Buddha saw that and he said, no, that's wrong. Sure, you might have been born in that situation because of the karma, but it doesn't mean you can't change and get out of that situation. That's what the Buddha was rallied against, That's why he allowed untouchable people to become monks. Now the Brahmins would never allow any non-Brahmin to become a monk because they think only Brahmins can become monks and religious people. You see, because they want to control society. But the Buddha wasn't like that, because he was more enlightened and more, open-minded, and knew the truth about. And in fact, it's a very interesting story. There was a man named Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, who was born as an untouchable in the 1920s or something like that. Anyway, and he wasn't allowed to go to school in India. And they wouldn't let untouchable kids go to school. And they had to stand outside the classroom doors and look in and maybe try to learn something, but they wouldn't let them in the classroom with the other students, because that's their view. They're untouchables. You can't get near them because they have this, so that's an extreme view. The Buddha saw that was nonsense. But anyway, this man is very interesting. But a rich Indian person who had some common sense and who had compassion saw that there was a potential in that boy, because he saw him, doing mathematical things, and this boy had intelligence, but he wasn't allowed to show it because, they wanted to say that all the untouchables were just dumb and couldn't learn anything. That's where they tried to hold them down. But, so this rich man took that boy under his wing and brought him to America. He went to Harvard and got a law degree. And, got the highest honors in the Harvard and the law degree. And went back to India, and at the time of the partition of India, if you know the history of India, the British ruled India until 1946. And then they got independence. But no one in India was smart, and no one knew how to write a constitution. So they got this guy, this untouchable who had a PhD in law, to write the Indian constitution, whereas before that he wouldn't have been allowed to only clean toilets. That was the only job they were giving untouchable people. You see, so it's very ironic how this guy's fortunes changed, even though he was born as an untouchable for whatever reason, but he was able to get out of that and change his karma and became, a very famous person in India, and wrote the Indian Constitution and championed the whole conversion of the untouchable people to become Buddhists. Because before that time in 1920, there was hardly no Buddhists in India at all, except very few. But there was, 30, 40 million untouchable people, and a lot of them converted to become Buddhists. They had a big ceremony in 1956, in which millions of these untouchables, including this man, took the 3 refuges from some Burmese monks, or Thai monks, I'm not sure, but they brought some monks from Burma or Thailand, and they gave them the layman's precepts, and they became the first modern Buddhists in India. And millions of them converted, and every year since then they had big conversion ceremonies. Anyway, there's a whole story behind that, but I'm not going to get into it. But I have experience with these people because I've gone to India many times, and I've gone on tours and teaching Dhamma to these kind of people in their villages and so on. It's very interesting. But anyway, I'm just saying that. I don't know how I got off on that. So anyway, this idea of karma and is very complex. So, but people can, like the Hindus, they manipulated it and made it into this doctrine that, when you're born in a certain, you can't change the situations of your birth. And so that's one way they manipulated it, corrupted the teachings of, well, it was never the teaching of the Buddha, but the original, in the original Vedic teaching. I don't know where it came from, but. The mind seems really silly sometimes. Really? Coming up with jokes or irreverent humor. How many people had any of those kind of things come into their mind the last 4 or 5 days? Tell some silly joke about Bhante Rahula probably. Lucky I can't read your mind. Or maybe I can. Is it best to respond to our mind's shenanigans with equanimity, like just smiling to it and shaking it off? Yes, in a way, knowing it's just conditioning, because that's what people in society do. They're always, their mind is full of, silly stuff, always, doing things, wanting to criticize and make jokes about people. And, there's a whole gamut of all these ethnic jokes and everything else that, people are telling about others. And, most of it's silly talk, which would be part of the sampapalapa, not to get carried away in doing this kind of things. But, it may arise. Or just to find yourself all crazy about something that's really like insignificant. Get all worked up over, very nonsensical things, right? And to laugh at yourself, yeah, it's good. And even if you stumble and fall down, twist your ankle, laugh. It's your own mindfulness. It's your own stupidity, your own unmindfulness. You trip, fall down, bump your head. Then you want to blame others. Or the door was too high, the door was too short. The cement was wet. Everybody's trying to blame and sue other people, right? When they themselves are the ones that probably, were unmindful and got themselves hurt. So when we do something unmindful, own it and laugh instead of cursing or trying to find the blame or fault in somebody else. If you're cutting something, you're unmindful and you're thinking about something else and cut your finger, laugh. Maybe you don't have to laugh, but anyway, So, yeah, our mind does all kind of foolish things. And so, to be but it's just conditioning, and we can change it, but only through mindfulness. So when you notice the mind getting into it, cut it off. Don't just indulge in it. Because, the mind is just a habit machine. It picks up habits very, very quickly. And so you have to avoid, that's what the part of the right effort, the effort to abandon, this kind of silly thoughts and unwholesome type of things, and to prevent them from coming again, in the future, by cultivating the more wholesome type of speech and actions. So, another point, or should we ask why it feels the need to be funny? Well, actually, even that pertains to speech. especially like when you're, with others, if you're in some discussions or you're sitting around, in the family table on a holiday and people are talking and, some papa lapa and, they expect you to join in and add your 2 cents worth over some stupid thing or their opinion about whatever, keep quiet. Don't get sucked into, their nonsense. And they might think you're a little bit strange, or if you do, just say some very, kind of polite words and, don't get sucked into, and an urge to want to, that's why speech, the Buddha told people to either talk Dhamma or keep quiet. Because we boast a lot in speech, and to impress others, and it's all motivated by the ego. All these things have the ego behind it. We want to be seen like, the life of the party or something else, or the king of all subjects and things like that. So, you can notice these motivations, these intentions, and, to try to, minimize that, especially if it's not necessary. Can you please explain the difference between the mind and the brain? Well, of course, the brain is, a lump of flesh inside your skull. The brain is like the hardware of a computer. The memory, the hard drive with the memory. But what goes into the hard drive? You have to feed it information, right? And then the hard drive processes it, sorts it out, puts it in chronological order or whatever. There's so many different things. Or the AI. Now, because all these hard drives are jammed with every thing that was ever written or spoken for the last 50 years, every single thing almost, it seems, every book is ever written is in the, the cloud and everything else. Millions of YouTube videos are all there in the cloud. Everything's been said. So that's like the hard drive. And then when you, click the AI thing, ask it a question, it's just like the brain working. It goes in there and searches all the hard drives for the information and then gives out some article, answer. So I would say that's probably the best analogy could be made about what is the brain and what is the mind. With its memory and consciousness. So, and the brain is just the kind of the storing that information and sorting it out and processing it. Because whenever sound comes in the ear, that sound has to go through the nervous system and into the brain, where sounds or memory is stored, and find out that where that vibration is. It matches up the vibration, and that vibration has a name. That's a cat meowing. That's Bhante Rahula's voice, and then it kicks that out. Is the answer. So the brain serves that function. That's why the mind needs a body in order to basically experience the world. Actually, I couldn't hear those words you said. Reprogram, yes. You reprogram the memory. No, you reprogram it's difficult to say exactly. I mean, these things are not easy to explain, because it's not common to, English language, some of the stuff like Dharma words and so on. But, you can reprogram the way you react to things. So that's reprogramming, basically the mind, but still that information, then that changed behavior will be stored in the brain, and then, you'll change your, ways of thinking. You can change the way you think, change the way you act, but only through mindfulness. That's the only way you can change, is being mindful and being aware of the intention, and then not to repeat that bad intention, but change it by, that's where the right effort comes from. The effort to consciously develop wholesome states and to get rid of the unwholesome states. That's that's the intention to do that. And that's the only way you can change. Otherwise, the habits they just keep going on as a habit. And that's why some people never change. Their whole life. They go through life until they're old and die, and they, I'm sure they change from a child to, middle age and then an older person. But the habits that they pick up, like the habit of their speech, if they're used to cursing people and they're used to whatever, drinking alcohol, so many kind of habits, you've got to make a tremendous effort to change. I mean, look at rehab, right? People go in rehab once they get addicted. I mean, that really takes a massive amount of work to change those habits of addiction. But we see it can be done, but it's certainly not easy. And you shouldn't let it go that far to become an addiction, those extreme addictions, But just the common little addictive habits that people have, like always having 2 lumps of sugar in your coffee every morning, or whatever, just simple things that are not that harmful, but, still being addicted to sensual pleasures, and always wanting to listen to music, wanting to do this or that, and the food and all that. As long as you have the means to do it lawfully, and you're not going to kill, cheat, lie, and steal to satisfy those things, then basically it's okay. If that's what you want to do. These look like they are written by the same person. That's a perception. What are your thoughts about spiritual therapy work that accesses the bhavanga to clear out past karmic roots, such as negative emotions, energies, and so on? So it's asking if these kind of therapies and people who do those kind of therapies, is it good, or is it meddling with one's karma? No, I think those type of spiritual therapies, if a person has difficulty, developing the ability to meditate, and that's why so many people are, go to so-called, I don't know, life coaches and spiritual therapists, and very popular thing now is people going on these spiritual journeys and taking psilocybin and ayahuasca and these kind of things in controlled circumstances in order to try to get some spiritual experiences. And they're doing lots of therapy with psilocybin with people with post-traumatic stress disorder, and it seems that they're having lots of benefits. There are benefits to do that. And so I don't see any problem with that, really. I mean, but it may only have a limited ability, help. But to make it permanent, I think the person at some point needs to be able to continue it on their own and develop that on their own, not just getting some peak spiritual experiences once in a while by taking these kind of drugs and so on, because they don't know how they got it. So they have to keep on taking it to get these experiences. But I wouldn't say it's interfering with their karma, because even we that have come to the Dhamma, you could say we're meddling with the karma by changing it, But we don't know what our karmic destiny was, Like, I decided to become a monk. Am I meddling in my karma? But meddling in a good way, to overcome the negative karma. So you have to meddle with it to make it, to let go of the negative karma and create the positive karma. So you could say that's meddling with it too. But, but that's a good thing. Because again, karma is not fixed. Karma is very fluid. You can change the karma, but you have to do it consciously. That means the habits. You can change the habits. Just like this untouchable boy I mentioned, Bhimrao Ambedkar, who was born as an untouchable, and they wouldn't even, let him into the schoolroom. But with the help of others and his own digging inside of himself, he, changed his karma. Otherwise, he would have stayed as an untouchable person, just cleaning toilets a whole life until they died, or something else. And the same with others, so many people born in these, unfortunate circumstances. Very few of them get out of it. But there are examples of people who have gotten out of it, of course. But unfortunately, a lot of them don't. And they just keep recycling their karma over and over, and, when sitting on the porch and looking at the flowers and trees, there's a sense of beauty or awe. Is this an idealized misperception? Is this wise attention? In other words, is it skillful to see some things as beautiful or worthy of reverence? Absolutely. The Buddha saw, he loved to be in the forest because, the monasteries are full of crazy people. Or not crazy, but, all kind of problems. So, and he was born under a tree. I mean, he was a prince, right? The son of a king and queen. So he could have very well been, born, in a golden crib or something, in the palace. But no, he was born under a tree. And he was enlightened under a tree. And he passed away under a tree. The Buddha, he could have been gone to the palace of the king and laid there on the throne and passed away and everything. No. He specifically chose to lay out in nature under a tree to die. And, all the monks, they were always wandering in nature. Of course, that was another time and place, of course, but anyway, so yes, to recognize the beauty, but not get attached to it, and so, because, when things are nice and, vibrant and so on, it has a pacifying effect. That's why we're going to go outside tonight and meditate. And then you'll see, you can just, if your eyes are open, the whole view there is just, it's calming for the mind, rather than looking at a bunch of smashed up cars or something, That's why I had people not clutter the parking lot with their cars, park back there so that when you walk in and out, you could see more of the natural things. And maybe you'll see Mita out stalking some mice around the pond tonight. Okay, that's cat's karma, right? And but even that is kind of beautiful. That's the cat's karma. There are multiple ways of developing concentration as I understand it. An example being memorizing a sutta. Will doing things like memorizing a sutta be helpful in our meditation practice? Would time be better spent just meditating? Well, you don't have to memorize a sutta. I don't know if memorizing a sutta is an example of concentration. In a way it might be, but not because, memorizing a whole sutta, reciting a whole sutta requires a lot of mental activity. So I doubt if you would reach a state of jhana and be able to recite a whole sutta. Because it requires too much mental activity. But, reading suttas and then not necessarily memorizing the whole thing, but remembering the meaning of the sutta, and then you meditate on the meaning of it, not just reciting the words, but you meditate on the meaning of the sutta or the stanza, like what I've recited a few times. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with suffering. This is the path to, freedom. So instead of just reciting that to yourself, you contemplate it. And all conditioned things are impermanent. The 5 aggregates. So meditate on the aggregates and see how, yes, they're all constantly changing. And when you see that with wisdom, you become disenchanted with suffering because you see that because they're constantly changing, there's no way you can really control them. Or trying to change them or trying to stop them or hold them, is the cause of suffering. So like that, you have to examine and contemplate the meanings of a lot of these things that you hear in the suttas and so on. Like all actions are led by the mind. Mind is their master, mind is their maker. act or speak with a defiled mind, then suffering follows. Okay, you can meditate on that and you can see. You can go back in your life the last several years and see how many things you did that, your speech and actions that, then caused problems for you, followed you around. Like my, smuggling hashish in India, for 10 years I was followed by Interpol. Wanting to catch me with something to put me in prison. But I didn't, I stopped carrying anything, and so I never really got caught from it. So a lot of other examples like that. So we contemplate these things. And whatever negative thoughts in your mind, ask yourself, why are these thoughts there? Ask yourself, if you have unpleasant thoughts or thoughts you don't like, memories, why are they there? And what's your answer? You put them there by practicing them, repeating them, or repeating your wrong beliefs that cause you to do things, and then things keep on happening back to us. And is somebody going to stop that for you? No, you put it there, you caused it, you got to change it. No one can do it for you. Of course, now Elon Musk is trying to get some little plug in a thumb drive in a brain receptacle now to try to program things. I don't know how that's going to work, but do you ever draw upon any teaching practices from Zen, Mahayana, Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism? Or do you stick closely to Theravada early text? Well, I've drawn on things from yoga. And also, this the chanting Namo Buddhaya. No other Theravada people I know chant Namo Buddhaya, like that. They chant Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samasa Buddhassa. You ever heard any your monks chanting Namo Buddhaya? Now there is one now. I think he learned it from me, actually. But anyway, so in the beginning, I used some things I learned from Tibetan Buddhism, like the perfect human rebirth, some kind of contemplations, but they're not different from Theravada texts. They're, they have quite similar, to the Theravada teachings, but primarily the teachings of meditation, I use the Satipatthana Sutta because, to me that's the direct way, So, yeah. Okay. Any last questions or any follow-up from any of that? Okay, so how many people want to go outside and meditate outside? Now, if you can't sit on the ground, you could, there's a bench out there, there's a metal bench could be sit on, or you could take maybe there's some of those chairs from the garage, you know, the ones we use to sit around the campfire. It's possible that somebody could sit on a chair. Does anybody want to sit on a chair? Has to sit on a chair. What about you, Suzanne? I think everybody wants to go outside. Just raise your hand again. How many people want to go outside? It's like everybody, pretty much. No, mosquitoes are great. Mosquitoes are your teacher because they teach you about intention and. Look, when I was in Sri Lanka, as a young monk, a young gung-ho monk in my first year, I was really gung-ho, you know, thought I was going to attain enlightenment, in 6 months. So I had this. So there was mosquitoes, bloodthirsty mosquitoes in Sri Lanka, you know, at Tapawani where I was ordained. And I had a little kuti out there in the forest, and the mosquitoes used to come out like at about 5 o'clock, 5 and 6 o'clock. And so I used to sit outside. The kuti was a little kuti, and then I had a walking path, about a 30, 40 feet walking path with a bench at the end of it where you would walk for an hour and then you'd sit for an hour, and then you'd get up and walk for an hour and sit for an hour, and you do that like most of the day, just alternating sitting and walking. And it was very humid there, much more than it is here, so it was very warm. And so I used to sit outside without the upper robe on, you know, just with sometimes just without anything, you know, from the waist up, or just like this. And mosquitoes used to come out and literally cover me with mosquitoes and bite. But I kind of did that on purpose, and I said, look, in my 15 years, I used to eat a lot of meat and shed the blood of some animals, unfortunately, and ate a lot of meat. So take my blood, and I use it as meditation to develop equanimity. And I just sort of grit my teeth and bared up all that biting. But at the same time, I was sending them metta. Okay, you mosquitoes, drink your fill and then leave me alone. And so they would bite. But afterwards, because I didn't react, there weren't many welts from that, or not much itching. But I use that to, undermine that the tension or the desire to do something or get away, and so that that was helpful. But I use that as a challenge, not to run away like everyone else, other people do. Or I stayed in a cave where there was poisonous snakes. And once in a while they'd crawl over my body when I was laying. But I would do it as a challenge, not to have fear and run away. And, to overcome the fear of death or other types of fear, and learn how to endure fear, endure, that kind of fear of death and things like that. Because I recited the snake mantra. There are special recitations they do in telling the snakes not to harm you. No, basically I was mindful. and the snake, they might have felt my vibrations, that I was not a threatening person to them. And I didn't directly step on them. And at night, I was sleeping in this cave. It's quite hot, on just a little, it was a concrete bed with just a little straw mat about a half an inch thick. And at night, a mouse would come out and nibble on my toe to get the salt. I used to love that, just I was awake, I felt this mouse nibbling on my toe. The average person would scream and run away. But, I had fun, so monks get fun from what other people fear, But, not all monks, but anyway, but that's the challenge, at least that I took, the monastic life, the perfect opportunity where we could do that and not be seen as some crazy person. And, I got tremendous benefits, for many years, practicing there in Sri Lanka. And so. Anyway, I don't want to go into all that. So let's go ahead and get ready. If you have something of your own, you could put on the ground, if you have your own yoga mat, use that. If you don't, there's some yoga mats down in here, some older ones that you can use to take outside. And there's some those blue and black cushions. There's a few of them in that. But you could take some of these red cushions, but as I mentioned, try not to put them directly on the grass. Put them on your yoga mat. And so, don't take these other thick cushions there. Just only a yoga mat and one round cushion. Okay? You might take a water bottle with you. So. Tonight is the summer solstice, it seems, the longest night of the year.
Longest day.
Longest day? Longest night?
Shortest night.
Shortest night.
Today is the longest day.
Oh, that's right.